Welcome to day 4 of the Gold Key Release training. We're picking up where we left off last time with determination as being our item for the Gold Key Release. And before we get into that, I'm opening us all up for ask and or tell. So if you have anything to ask or anything to share, and I'm reminding you that I sent you some email earlier in the week with some points that either clarified things for you or raised questions in your mind. Either way, that works just fine. So
I have no questions. So,
do you have any comments, observations?
well, not really. I made it in the last session with the gold key release taking a little bit too long and losing that strength of the last step. So that was the only comment that I had. So
Okay.
I felt that if it's shorter, the release at the end it's a little bit stronger, more vivid. Otherwise, it's muted. The stop imagining step. So,
can you tell me what muted is for you? How do you experience it?
It's the feeling of letting go. It's not there anymore.
Is the item still remaining?
The item, yeah, indeed loses strength through the process, but it's not as distinguishable. The release is not as abrupt.
Good. That's a point that I want to raise this morning. I want to talk about that because there's something that happens often during the procedure in which early on in the procedure, things start releasing in a stepwise way. And what happens there is that the mental focus also diminishes, because mental focus is a kind of constraint or restriction. It is of the nature of stress. When the release occurs, that's fading out, but so is the focus. That's the intention of the procedure, is to dissolve the focus. And what happens at the end of a good run-through of the gold key release is that the focus is so dissolved or dissipated that you may even have trouble remembering what the item was. It also happens that it becomes more and more difficult to carry the procedure through because you don't have the instrument of mind or focus with which to carry it through. That's not a deficiency or a fault. That's just the result happening earlier in the procedure than the end.
Okay.
When that happens, what we do then is simply relax into it. We notice any effort we're making to recapture any experience and relax that also. So a good outcome of the procedure is also the inability to do any more of the procedure. It's been so dissolved along with the procedure that there's hardly anything in us capable of carrying the procedure through. That's the intended outcome. Before I move on, is there any conversation you'd like to have about that?
Well, now that we're talking, a question came up, and that question is, if an item, let's say we run it through gold key release a couple of times, it seems that it's completely gone. The next day, you feel it that it's coming back. So it's, but not as strong, but you kind of have to chip at it, right?
No. That's something I've brought up earlier, and that is that it may return. In effect, it may seem to return stronger than before, but you can't get a grip on it. One can't even run the gold key release procedure on it it doesn't have enough density even to run a gold key release, but our sensitivity has been increased by the stages of the gold key release.
Okay.
And in that case, we go through a period that I call burn off. And that's the intensification that lasts about a day to a day and a half after, and then self-resolves. It doesn't require anything done for it to resolve. But what it's doing is it's getting us to let go even of the effort to make it go away.
Okay.
It was an unexpected occurrence when I first started working with gold key release. Then I saw a pretty good consistency of it happening. Not every time even, but it was frequent enough that I saw it as a repetitive event, but nothing needs to be done about it. And when it self-resolves, then the result has been achieved. Prior to that, it seems to have been the result of some sort of effort going through the gold key release. But in the day or day and a half after, no further effort is required. We discover that any effort to make it dissolve further is futile. It doesn't have any effect on it. And that puts us into the position of having to stop efforting.
So that raises the next question. So if the item we picked in the beginning in session 1, this is session 4, is determination, and if we did a good work on it, why do we bring it back?
I mean, why does it return?
Yeah, why do we still working on determination on that item?
Well, until a person arrives at the dissolution of it in the way I've described, that it seems to be there, but we can't get a grasp of it. Until that happens, it's not done. So okay. I'm going to clarify something about that. It has to do with beginnings, middles, and endings. In the beginning, when an area is running on automatic, when an item is happening automatically without our intention, we feel difficulty even in saying words about it. That's typical of anything that we don't feel clear about. We have trouble putting it into words. After the gold key release, we're able to put it into words, but it's as elusive after as before. The difference is one was unavailable to us at the beginning and available but lacking density or lacking substance at the end. So the pattern is there. The pattern is never destroyed. The pattern simply loses its intensity. It loses its intensity to the point that it seems as dense as smoke. We can't grasp smoke. When that happens, we're no longer in conflict with it. We may feel the intensity of it if life brings it up again, because the pattern is still available to us. It isn't made unavailable. We're simply released from the grip, or we release the grip we've had on it. Then when life calls for it, it comes up, but it comes up without all of the extra load that it would have before we cleaned it up. It comes up in a way in which we can be spontaneous with it, and we can be appropriate to the situation.
Okay.
And this is completely different from most other approaches of addressing issues in life. People expect it either to be gone and they're forever away from it, or they feel entrapped by it. This is neither. It's stepping out of the situation altogether through the gold key release, so that when it comes up, we are in a free condition using that item, whatever it was, because it was called for by the situation. And this is what I mean by spontaneous right action, or spontaneous appropriateness, because it isn't beset by confusion and entanglement and stuckness. We're free to fine-tune that response to the present situation when it arises. Otherwise, the old habits load up the response and distort it. So this ties back to what I said earlier about why do gold key release on a desirable item? The answer is we've grown into that item full of conditioning from one thing or another, which gets carried forward through memory into situations. The past is carried forward into the present. And that's why people's patterns seem to be chronic, to be repetitive. When we clean that up, when the situation that calls for that item or that ability arises, we are much better tuned to the situation as it's happening now, because we're not bringing the past adaptation into it. So it's a case of there's a term, Wu Wei, which is out of the Taoist tradition. It means no effort. It doesn't mean laziness. It means spontaneity. Spontaneity is light and quick. It happens instantly, and it's always fine-tuned to the situation, unless it's burdened by memories of the past. Then it becomes a dilemma. Am I doing the right thing? Should I do more? Should I do this at all? All these questions might arise. Those all come from the past memories associated with that item or condition, in this case, determination. Does that bring up anything in you?
Yeah. Yep.
Anything you want to say or ask about that?
Yeah, it's difficult to trust the intuition, the spontaneous intelligence, because we're conditioned to rumigate with our minds a problem before taking an action, and that's difficult to just jump in because just you feel like doing that, or it feels appropriate. So you want to first measure it and say, okay, this is what I want to do. So it's a bit difficult to just get to terms with that spontaneous intelligence, because you're not used with it. Just that.
That's right. Almost all of humanity is operating that way. They're trying to use memory of the past in order to control the present for a beneficial future. That's called entanglement, or being in a sticky situation. So I subtitled this training, Getting Free of Sticky Situations Without Struggle. All of that, bringing the past into the present, is the struggle that you just described. It's completely different from the way most people operate. So of course, it's unfamiliar. People don't trust it. But if they do gold key release, they don't need to trust it, because they will spontaneously be different, having cleaned up whatever the gold key release cleaned up for that item. You can see this is like a giant leap in a certain way. That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah. Now, people in this kind of training are coming from the typical mentality. So it's understood there's going to be that kind of dilemma in people. All people need to do is follow the steps, allow the dissolution to occur. They come out the other end feeling normal and natural, not weird. And then if the situation arises or the burn-off period comes up, either one, they're in a completely different relation to it. Now, part of what the burn-off period does, and this isn't strategic or something that we try to have happen, it's not pleasant. The burn-off is intense sometimes. But when it happens, we find it's impossible to strategize the way we did in the past, because all our efforts at strategizing and manipulating the situation immediately are felt to fail, and we're face to face with the item itself in a naked and exposed way. Fortunately, there's nothing we need to do about it, and when we realize that all our efforts are futile, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to relax into it. There's no alternative. And that's exactly the state of being disentangled, relaxing into it. Then we are disentangled from the sticky situation without having to control it, without having to give in, without having to oppose it, without having to strive for some alternative ideal. But all of those are habits that humans on Earth these days are addicted to. So burn-off breaks that habit, whether we like it or not. And it's not pleasant sometimes, but it's temporary. And afterwards, day or day and a half, if it even happens at all, we feel much lightened up. We just feel lighter and more positive and easier without any special effort to do so. So this is a different animal, but it doesn't need to be chipped away at. The only reason it might need to be chipped away at is that we quit the procedure before we were finished. Do you have anything more to add to that conversation?
I was imagining it as the layers of an onion, so that was my impression. That's why we keep going back at determination. It's like we peel a layer and then we have to peel all the layers until there's nothing left. So
exactly, and we haven't reached that point yet.
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Because we have limited time every time, enough to make a recording and to give people an experience to begin with. But for things like, in this case, determination, that's a loaded item. Has to do with self-determination, freedom, will, responsibility. It's loaded. However, in these times, I think, as with none other, determination is all important because we're in the midst of very turbulent times. And without cleaning up determination, we may feel very much the victim of these times. Not only that, but we're doing a training and a procedure that is broadly applicable. And I'm not going to be around all the time for you all. You're going to be living your own lives. So to the degree that you've cleaned up determination, when other items come up, you'll have the confidence and determination to clean it up also. So it's in a certain way, this is kind of like the master item. It's not really, because there are many of that caliber, but it's one that's recognizable by people, determination. So in a way, we're doing what I often say, deal with the worst first. The bigger the problem, the bigger the payoff when it's cleaned up.
Agree.
All right, let me take a moment here and get oriented. Oh, yes. Now, determination, the word has more than one meaning. One is just strength of will. And so it's in the intention line of development, determination. But another use of the word determination is to identify something.
Correct.
And my question would be then, when you intend something, how do you know that you've succeeded?
That's a good question.
May I suggest an answer?
Yep.
It feels like it matches what we were determined to have happen. There's a relaxation that occurs when a determination is fulfilled.
What we've imagined in the beginning, it would be that
Right.
That comes to be true.
That's right. And so when the determination is fulfilled, we stop determining it because it's already there. So the way we know that we've succeeded is that there's a relaxation and we don't feel the feeling of determination any longer. There's an ease that replaces it. So I'm now going to bring up something that will help people working with the determination as an item, and that is frustration. It's a very odd thing, but frustration feels very similar to determination. Have you noticed? Feel what frustration feels like. And then feel what determination feels like.
They're similar.
Isn't that interesting? Now, before we do cleanup, if we have frustrating circumstances, they'll require us to do one of two things: give in or persist with determination. If we give in, then well, let me say it a different way. When we persist in it, in the face of frustration, it's like exercising muscles. The determination gets stronger and stronger the longer we persist in the face of frustration. It's like an isometric exercise. It's also like having one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. Things heat up. That's why it's much better to do cleanup with something like the gold key release, so that we can use much less determination to get the intended outcome. So when we experience frustration and we feel that feeling and consider it to be the feeling of determination, let's do that as an experiment right now. Feel or remember what it feels like to feel frustrated. Do that now. And nod when you have it. Good. Now, imagine that that feeling of frustration is actually the feeling of determination. And signal for me. Isn't that interesting?
It is. It is. It's very little different. It's a bit different, but very little.
Right. I'll bring up one more thing and then we'll go into practice. Okay. We've got a phrase that has gotten very familiar to many people: the power of now.
I read that book a few times, not once.
Okay. Well, I have a variation on that. I call that the power of no. Generally, no is a pretty strong intention. And yes is often very tentative, because yes opens us to the unknown. When you say yes, something's coming. When we say no, we're at least attempting to stop it. And if it isn't getting stopped, we increase the feeling of no, unless we just give in. But as long as no is happening, it's putting us in touch with a certain kind of strength in us. If we, again, imagine remembering the feeling of no, and imagine that that's actually the feeling of yes, when the yes is truly yes. What happens?
Imagine remembering the feeling of no, right?
Yes, and do that first.
Okay.
And imagine that's the feeling of intending yes.
It's a fine line between them.
How often do we get to the intensity of yes that's equal to the intention of no?
Not often.
See? So the power of no is actually the power of yes. The difference is no curtails or shrinks experience, and yes expands it. But both have the same potential. Now, if we can do a yes as strongly as we can do a no, our determination has been empowered by the feeling of no. But in these times, people tend to give in to no fairly quickly. They call that resignation. They don't convert the intensity of no into the power of yes. The closest that comes is positive thinking, and positive thinking doesn't use no, it tries to shut no out. What we're doing is integrating it. So that's another aspect of using determination as an item in the gold key release. You see, it has great potential, but I haven't heard reports from 5 people that said it's disappeared, it's gone. So they're not done, that's all.
Good point.
And
I cannot say it's gone myself, right? But after the first session, the burn off was pretty strong. After the second session was strong still. And the last Tuesday, it wasn't much burn off, but it was still a little bit. But the first day was the worst.
yeah. All right. Shall we do some gold key release?
Okay.
All right. So, as with all balanced intelligence procedures, whatever comes up, feel it, relax, and open to the next step. Don't evaluate for correctness. Take what you get. It's unique in everyone's case, what comes up, the feeling that comes up. And it's because it was there to be brought up. So it can't be done wrongly. As long as a person follows the steps, they can't get it wrong. Here we go. Determination. Determination. Feeling. Feeling determination. Determination. Notice where you feel it in you. Determination. Determination. Listen. Listen. Feel the intensity of its intensity. Determination. Feel the intensity of identifying determination. Determination. Feel the shape of its intensity. Determination. Intending. Determination. Intending. Determination. Intending. Refusing. 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 Determination. Refusing. Determination. 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 It matters. Determination. Determination doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Determination matters. Feel how it mattering involves you. Feel how it mattering involves others. It's true. It's true. Untrue. 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 It's true. untrue, untrue. It's true, it's true. Remembering, remembering. It's true, it's true. Remembering, remembering determination. It's true. Remembering, remembering. Untrue, untrue. Remembering, remembering determination. Untrue. Remembering determination. It's true. Remembering determination. Untrue. Allow how remembering involves imagining. Stop imagining. Let it dissolve and dissipate. Notice you are awake. Is it more, less, the same, or gone? If it's gone, it's finished. Otherwise, take what's left, feel having it, and start again. Okay, so we went through the first part and we interrupted. Just in case the question arises, there's no loss from interrupting because there was no gain to begin with. We're not gaining here, we're dissolving. The most that can happen is that a person wanders from the process and can get back into it fairly quickly as soon as we resume. So if you're doing this by yourself and you decide to do just the first part now and the second part later, or some other interruption occurs, that's fine. You can't lose anything from this because we're actively involved in losing the grip. We're not gaining knowledge. There's nothing to remember. Okay, let's resume now. So this is where you take what's left if you can remember it. If you can't, that's a good sign. However, if you can, take what's left, feel it. Determination, determination. Feeling, feeling determination, determination. Notice where you feel it in you. Determination, determination. Listen, listen. Feel the intensity of its intensity. Determination. Feel the intensity of identifying determination. Determination. Feel the shape of its intensity. Determination. Refusing. Determination. Refusing. Determination. Refusing. Intending. 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 Determination. Intending. Determination. 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 Doesn't matter. Determination. Determination matters. It matters. Determination doesn't matter. Feel how it doesn't matter involves you. Feel how it doesn't matter involves others. Untrue, untrue. It's true, it's true. It's true. Untrue. It's true, it's true. Untrue, untrue. Remembering, remembering. Untrue, untrue. Remembering, remembering determination. Untrue. Remembering, remembering. It's true, it's true. Remembering, remembering determination. It's true. Remembering determination. Untrue. Remembering determination. It's true. Allow how remembering involves imagining. 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 Intending, imagining. Imagining determination. Determination. Intending. Imagining. Intending, intending. Determination. 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 Imagining, imagining. Remembering. Imagining. Imagining determination. Determination. Remembering. Imagining. Remembering, remembering. Determination. 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 Imagining, imagining. Attention. Imagining. Imagining determination. Determination. Attention. Imagining. Attention. Attention. Determination. 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 Imagining, imagining. Imagining determination. 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 Stop imagining. Stop stopping. Let it dissolve and dissipate. Notice you are awake. Is it more, less, the same, or gone?
I think it's gone.
You think or do you feel?
I have trouble bringing it back.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, that's the intended outcome. You feel the shift there? There's a kind of effortless certainty about that. Yeah, that's what we're after. That's called being disentangled from the sticky situation. Attention is no longer lingering, trapped in it. In fact, it's hard to get attention onto it because the form, in this case of determination, feels like emptiness. That makes sense? Does that fit?
Yes.
So in the Heart Sutra, the famous line is, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Gee. See, it's a tangible experience, not a mental construct. Okay. This ought to be interesting now, because in circumstances in which determination rises in you, notice whether it feels familiar and typical or unfamiliar and fresh. And if you get some burn off, starting generally the day after, that's usually when it happens. Yeah, you know, you can try to do more with it, but you'll discover very quickly that there's nothing that needs to be done. You'll just be, if anything, passing through the residue in you of your habit of determination, but without stickiness. It'll be just there like a ghost. And then it'll just fade out. And it generally fades out when we're not looking, not when we're still looking at it or searching. That means doing something else. And suddenly we're out of it. And then we notice that it's not there anymore. Okay, anything to ask or tell about that?
You were saying at one point that less is more. So rushing this procedure, like doing it, let's say 10 times in a row, would make no sense, right?
Yeah, you'd get worn out before then, probably. The thing is, you do it until you feel like you're pushing yourself. As soon as you push yourself, stop.
Give it time for the burn off to occur. And after that passes, then it makes sense to you to get back at it. Let's say you have another item you want to work on, and you want to do it the right way. So rushing it is probably not the. I'm asking if what do you think? If do it too many times in a row, just one item, because you can set time aside, say, I have this item and I want to work on it and I want to get it over with today.
Yeah,
Is that
that's what gets cleaned up in running determination through a gold key release. Impatience gets dealt with. And rushing doesn't work. You may have noticed that there's a pacing to my delivery. At different times, there's more silence and others less silence between steps. That's because if we go quickly, we skip over the depth. We can't penetrate to the depth quickly. It takes time to sink into the depth. So there are more spaces, more beats between steps where we want it to sink in first. So rushing doesn't work. If we restrain ourselves from rushing, the intensity, the back pressure of restraining rushing becomes potency for the next step. It's like the relation between no and yes. Restraining is a form of no. When we get to the next step, we make yes to the next step. The built-up energy of the restraint goes into the next step. That's why there are pauses. It's why working from a written script is not ideal for a beginner. Someone who's practiced, who knows how to deliver the pacing of it, will look at a written script and see, I should pause more here so I can feel it more. But a beginner, they should work from audio instruction or live instruction in order to experience the pacing. Does that fit with your experience?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't that funny how many subtleties there are to this? When I started with this, I didn't know any of that. When the possibility of this procedure came to me, I didn't have anything of that sophistication. It taught me. The gold key release itself taught me how to do the gold key release. And that's true of all the other balanced intelligence procedures. I didn't know in advance. Running the procedures taught me how to run them. So a person who starts out here is going to start out however well they start out. And with practice, they'll be making spontaneous discoveries without my having to say anything to them. You've already shown the signs of that. Also, Amy showed the signs of it in a comment she made earlier. And it was my experience also. The procedures are self-teaching. Once you get started, they have a life of their own. Okay. Anything more, or we can quit here as you like?
Yeah, I think it's time to end.
That's good.
Next session is going to be Tuesday, same time.
Same time, same place.
All right.
I have one question that just occurred to me. Have you been using the training version that I published?
I have a few times, like three times, 4 times.
Mm-hmm. Any comment about that?
Also been reviewing one of your posting from like 7 years ago, a riff on the gold key release as well. So this is just for me to get the because you're explaining there a little bit different. And this one is more like steps instruction. It's not just to listen to and just follow along. So kind of nice to go from the first run into the second run with those in the mirror-like steps. The steps are mirrored in a different sequence. So that's my only comment. It's interesting. It's took me a little time to imagine how that involves other, because you know what, I have control on me, but on others, I was like, all right, just feel what you're feeling. But it was feel how not mattering involves other. That was I need a little time to just get the feeling, but I let go whatever arises, because you just this were your instructions. Whatever arises. That's true that sometimes I'm doing something based on what my conditioning is, and my conditioning, it may be based on others. It may be on a professor from high school. And that's how I behave, because of that professor taught me that way to do the things. And so indeed, some things involves you, some things involves others, but it's still in you, if I can say so.
Well, that's well said, and I agree with that. Now, it's a peculiar thing, but the same steps, the same words may bring up entirely new insight at different times of repetition. So what you got from involves others this time, yeah, with the professor example, That's one way. It can involve others. But I don't limit the possibility of any of the steps because I've seen that they can bring up all kinds of different interpretations. And the only thing they can bring up is already what's latent in us, the unrecognized subconscious memory or conditioning. So it's a rabbit hole, if you know what that metaphor. Okay, well, thank you for allowing this last question here. And I'm hoping that the others will view this and will get the illumination in themselves according to the clues that we've placed here in this conversation.